Hi, thank you for everybody joining us today. We will be getting started with our webinar. As always, please have your mic muted and use the chat feature for asking any questions that John and Melissa will address at the end. And with that, I will turn this over to John.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Michelle said in the chat field, today is Veterans Day, and we'd like to recognize all veterans that are on the call and thank all of our veterans for helping to guard America's freedoms. So it's a very special day in that regard. Welcome to the webinar today. I would remind you that the webinar is for the benefit of our restaurant, hotel, travel and tourism, and all of the other friends and partners of PRLA. This is off the record. It's not designed as a press call. We do entertain any and all press inquiries, and happy to do so, but not at this time. So if you're a member of the press, please disconnect and check back with us later. And with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa Bova. Melissa, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's kind of funny because I have tons of updates, but I thought this webinar this week was going to end up being a lot more information, and it turns out we're still waiting on things. But if you can see, I do not have a Zoom background today because Macy wanted to participate. She's sleeping off the rain in the background. We'll see if she deigns to wake up at all during this webinar. I do tend to put her to sleep. Let's start with election updates. I'm going to cover everything I know, which is more than last week, so that's something. So federal. We had this conversation last week during the webinar where I said, don't get really excited about a red wave because we still need to count all of the ballots. And also, as I warned last week, the mail-in ballots were 3-1, sometimes 4-1 in Democratic favor. So all of Trump being ahead, some Congress people being ahead or being behind, everything really swung the other way as those ballots were counted. So obviously, we are still counting ballots, which I'll get to in a minute, but federally, for those of you that don't want to hear this, I'm sorry to tell you, but Joe Biden will be our next president. I don't see any path forward. And I think any pushback that's coming from the Trump administration is not going to succeed. So we need to prepare ourselves for a Biden administration. I mean, the good news is that it's not a Bernie Sanders administration. So let's take a win where we can get it. Also at the federal level, really, we did not see that blue wave at the federal level within the House and the Senate, and even within the state as well, which I'll touch upon. So, and I think I mentioned this last week, it seemed that people just don't like Donald Trump. They don't not like Republicans. They just really don't like Donald Trump. And that's where we saw really that blue wave in terms of the presidency, probably not as big as one as we thought, but we didn't see it as much in the down ballot races. So at the federal level, the Republicans actually picked up, it looks like 5 seats. The Democrats will still have the majority in Congress, but not as big a majority as they had going into the election, which I think a lot of them were surprised at. I think they really thought Biden's votes would trickle down to them, and that really didn't happen. At the US Senate level, we just got word yesterday that in North Carolina, the Republican senator maintained his seat. That's good news for us in terms of trying to maintain Republican leadership in the US Senate. I've mentioned this before. I always like a government that has a balance of power. So I never like one party to be in control of everything. So we do have 3 races. Right now we have 29-28 Republican majority in terms of races for the US Senate. We are expecting 2 runoffs in Georgia. If we thought Pennsylvania was bad in terms of commercials and all of that, I think Georgia is going to be a whole new land of money just pouring in. So those races are going to be a runoff, and then we're still waiting for a final count on the race in Alaska, which we expect the Republican candidate to win. But if both of those Georgia races, something wonky happens, we could have a Senate of 50-50. The hope is that it will be 51-49 Republican majority, which is that balance of power I like to see personally. So that's where we are federally. I will talk about them coming back to session at the federal level. State, same thing. really just, I think, and I was flinching last week as ballots were being counted. We just saw Republicans maintain leads for the most part, especially for the statewide races. Josh Shapiro did win Attorney General, which is good for him because he has plans to run for governor in 2 years. But we saw the treasurer race and the Auditor General race go to Republicans, which in some of those cases hasn't happened for more than 50 years. So really saw, like I said, people were voting because they don't like Donald Trump, but that didn't necessarily impact their votes for some of the down ballots. House, for the state house, we are still counting ballots. They are still weeding through some of these provisional ballots. So some of these races have not been decided yet, which we'll get to in a minute. It looks like right now, House Republicans are saying that they picked up 3 seats, which would be a 113 to 90 majority. One of those seats is kind of still being counted, so it might be 112 to 89, but still the Republicans in the House picked up seats in the election. In the Senate, again, votes are still being counted, which is why my update isn't as exciting as I wanted it to be, because we'll get to leadership elections. Some of those did not happen this week because they still don't know some of these races that are still being decided. In the Senate, as I mentioned last week, we did lose, for those in the Southeast, Senator Tom Killian did lose his reelection, which he was a huge champion and is a huge champion of the industry. So that was kind of hard hitting. But out West, we really are seeing that it's the Trump effect out there. So Senator Iovino, in that seat flips every 4 to 8 years. I don't know what it is. That seat always flips Republican Democrat. She was a Democrat. She was beaten by a Republican. And Senator Jim Brewster, they are still counting provisional ballots. That race is very close. He might lose his reelection. So we might have the Senate Republicans gain a seat, which would give them a 30-19-1 majority, or a 29-21 majority. I hate math. But either way, long story short, Republicans are maintaining control of the House and the Senate. That is that balance of power that I like, especially with our Democratic governor and some of the decisions that he's making. But that's where we are really in terms of states elections right now. And we should have the final word by next week. I do have here the politics. It doesn't really matter what side you're on. If you think there's voter fraud or you think there isn't voter fraud, there is a lot of political rhetoric when you have, President Trump saying he refuses to concede because there's voter fraud. There are members of his party that are going to stick with him, as they should do, as they are all of the same party. And then you have others that are saying, okay, you need to step down. There isn't voter fraud. And quite frankly, if there was any type of mistakes or any of that, I don't think there is anything that would swing how this election went. But we are seeing a lot of this rhetoric in Harrisburg right now. There's been a number of press conferences from Republican leadership. There was a press conference yesterday from House Republican members demanding an audit to be run by the legislature to try and balance out what they're saying is voter fraud from the Secretary of State. So just that, the most annoying part of my job piece, which is party politics getting in the way of actually getting things done. So that's kind of where we are as that plays out. As I said, President Trump is suing left, right, and in between in every state that he can, and on as many fronts as he can. I don't see that swaying anything. I expect the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, to get involved, and we'll see where all of that lands. As I said, what we're waiting on, there are a few races that haven't been decided yet. And that's also why we only had leadership elections in one part of one chamber this week. So the House Republicans, which I'll get to, had their leadership elections, and the Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and House Democrats all have delayed their leadership elections because, quite frankly, they just Representative Germany, the minority leader in the House, might lose his race. So you can't reelect somebody to be leader if he loses. And of course, there are those Senate races that are still a little bit in flux that they're waiting on. So all of that was supposed to happen yesterday is getting kicked back to potentially this Thursday, tomorrow. More likely, I think we'll see some of those next week. But I talk about this because all of this is what lays the groundwork for our legislative priorities moving forward. So whoever's elected leader, if they're friends with the industry, if they're not, what our best chances, what their interests are, all of that really dictates what PRLA advocates for and pushes for at the legislative level. Let's move on kind of from the election, and I'll circle back to it. Federal update. Congress is returning for, they call it lame duck. In Harrisburg, we call it sunny die, whatever. The House returns next week. Senate returns the week after. I don't know how many weeks have I been saying I don't know when it comes to a recovery package. I think that's even more now than ever. Anything could happen when they return. You could have Democrats wanting to get a recovery package through before President-elect Biden takes office, is, checking a box before he comes in and has to start pushing these things. You could have President Trump saying, okay, if I lost, I want to do something good for the American people and help them get through this crisis. I know that sounds silly as it came out. Or you might have President Trump saying, I don't want to do anything. I lost the election and therefore, screw everybody. Good luck to you. There's no prediction right now. There is a push. Senator McConnell in the Senate has said he wants to get a package done, which is a nice change for him. Historically, he has pushed back on doing any package before the election. So at minimum, there's going to be, and you heard this at PRLA's annual meeting this week from Chip Rogers and Tom Bonet, that there's going to be a push at least for another drawdown of the PPP and a refueling of that, allowing you that second drawdown, which I think if we drilled down to what do we need right now immediately, that would be what that is. So the hope is that something can get across the finish line there. They do need to get a budget passed at the federal level. So all of these things are going to be discussed as they return to session. The House goes back next week and the Senate goes back the week after. Next slide. State. Just as an FYI, as you all know, I'm sure you all participated, maybe. PRLA's annual meeting was this week, and just last week, PRLA's policy committee met. And just wanted to provide a brief update of what came out of that meeting. The PRLA's policy committee is a combination of our three legislative committees. So that's PRLA's Alcohol Service Committee, our Government Affairs Committee, and our Lodging and Tourism Committee. And those three committees are pretty much the basis of our entire government affairs advocacy platform. So twice a year, they come together and basically say, as one big unit, what are PRLA's priorities right now? In the focus, we do have a PRLA 3-year plan, which we kind of set aside during COVID, and we're going to continue to kind of set aside as we continue to focus 100% on COVID recovery as we go into next year, with the policy committee revisiting some of those broader policy items that we want to advocate for. But right now we recognize top priority is getting you grant funding at the state and federal level. Getting you protection as it pertains to unemployment, maybe clarifying some of the items there, making sure that you don't have any charges from unemployment as that continues, getting you reopened, finding a path forward there in terms of bringing bar seating back, and everything as it pertains to trying to help the industry through. So that was really a unanimous message from all three of our legislative committees. So that's what we will be working on over the next few months, with a revisit of what our next steps in terms of PRLA's legislative priorities should be after that. Part of that also, which you'll be hearing about and we'll be educating you all on, will be PRLA's Political Action Committee. I talked about that a little bit last week. We will be working to ramp that up moving into 2021. As you all saw, if we do not engage politically, we lose. So we will be working on ramping up funds for that. Those are personal dollars, and we'll of course be educating all of you on that. I know many of you are new in your interaction with the PRLA, so we will make sure that you learn more about, hopefully as we get through COVID, we'll get back to like my sweet spot of like government affairs all the time. So I'll get to go back into my happy place of that's all I talk about. And when we get there, of course, we will educate you on what we're working on and how you can all continue to be engaged, because there will be a life post-COVID, I swear, I promise. Also, on the leadership election front, as I mentioned, House Republicans had their leadership elections yesterday. It was about as anticlimactic as it can be, and that's really because you don't see a shakeup in leadership unless a leader retires or unless a certain party just did terribly in an election. And of course, the House Republicans picked up seats when they were expected to lose seats. So we really kept the leadership structure on the House Republicans in place. So Representative Brian Cutler from Lancaster is our Speaker of the House. He continues in that role. Representative Kerry Benninghoff continues as Majority Leader. He hails from Centre County, home of State College. And then trickling down from there, we've had a few new additions from people retiring. We have Martina White from Philadelphia, the only Republican from Philadelphia was elected into a leadership post. And a few others were added as well. And we had some challengers, but all of this was in the update yesterday. So we've only had, like I said, 1 out of the 4 pieces of leadership to be elected. And for my political nerdness, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens with the Democrats, especially because they anticipated, and as you all know, they spent millions upon millions of dollars, in some cases, $2 million to $500,000 in some of these races with funds that they've received across the country, and they still couldn't pick up seats. So I think there might be a bit of an awakening as it pertains to leadership elections in the other 3 pieces. So Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and House Democrats. Session schedule, they are coming back to session next week, and we have a few things that we need to get done as it pertains to session. The current budget ends November 30th, so they need to figure out how to fund the rest of the budget through June 30th, or at least, use some tape and Elmer's glue to cobble together something to get the state through to June 30th. And 2, PRLA's top priority right now is that $1.3 billion in unspent CARES Act money. I can assure you that every creative person in the Capitol is trying to find a way to use that to balance the budget by using it for maybe human services or things that they can connect back to COVID, because that's what it has to be used for. But we're going to be continuing to push hard that those funds need to be used for the hospitality industry specifically. And to that end, how you can help with that next slide, Eric. A rally. Everything's changed for the rallies, everything. We had this great idea that we were going to have regional rallies across the state. And it was a really good idea. And I have to give a lot of thanks to Heidi Howard and Ben Felecha and Steph Otterson and Kendra Hepler, who just worked with us to find locations and get communications out for these 8 rallies we were going to have across the state. And then we had torrential downpours today. So the rally we were going to have this afternoon in Lancaster was canceled. And then they scheduled session for next week in Harrisburg, which meant that all of the rallies we were going to have regionally around the state next week, we wouldn't have any legislators there. And really part of the point of these rallies, it's a few different folds. 1, we aren't the problem. We are not the reason that COVID cases are increasing. More and more we are hearing and know that it's private gatherings, it's being tied to sports, things like that. 2, we will not make the winter unless we're allowed to reopen safely. And 3, we need that CARES Act funding, and we need more federal funding. So this is, like I said, our opportunity to continue to bang the drum, continue to have those legislators who support us come out. So all of the rallies next week, and even if you participated in the 2 that are happening this week, we had one in Chester County yesterday. We have one this afternoon in the Poconos. We want you all to come to Harrisburg, and we just want to have all of you there. Don't forget your masks, socially distanced, but we want to show force, and we will be inviting the legislature to come out. They're all going to be in the Capitol, so it'll be the opportunity for them to come out and support the industry. And we're already lining up speakers, but really we're asking you if you can make that trip to Harrisburg. I think it'll just be a really good opportunity for us to come together and just voice our frustration. And this has been something that many of you have been asking for a while. And while we were trying to do it regionally to make it all a little bit more convenient, the legislature, per usual, had a different idea. I do see, are there phrases you would like us to make signs for to hold at the rally? I am so good at so many things, not that I'm modest or anything. I am terrible at catchy phrases. I got nothing. I mean, my sign would say like, stop hurting us, or stop being stupid, Governor Wolf. So, I mean, I probably not good, but maybe we can come up with something. Look at some of the infographics Kendra's put together. I know Dave McGrogan had a great sign in Chester County yesterday, no justice, no peas, as in like the food peas to save restaurants. And then I know there were a bunch of good signs in Westchester. Don't ask me for catchy phrases. I have nothing for you. So I apologize for that. I do want to touch upon one quick thing. We can go to the next slide and I'll get into the mitigation, but this is something that came out yesterday. And for those of you that were timely on the webinar, I was running late because I was working on something. There is another study that was released from Stanford, basically once again trying to tie COVID to restaurants. An ironic piece of this, from what we're hearing from the National Restaurant Association, is that they're using data from March to May, which is kind of funny because all of you were shut down for indoor dining from March to May. And for those of you in Philadelphia, you were shut down until September. So I'm not entirely sure where they pulled data from, but it certainly wasn't from Pennsylvania restaurants. So we are working on a response to that, and we will get all of that to you. This is just, we're going to constantly have to deal with this. But as we get that information, I hope to have it in the daily update today of kind of why that data probably really doesn't reflect our industry and even beyond that, Pennsylvania restaurants. Case counts are terrible. Even when you look at the total number of testing, the positivity rate is increasing, and that's where we're seeing the effects of that. We're regularly now going over 4,000 cases a day. Before, when we went over 1,000, I flinched. Now I'm just not looking. I'm just kind of covering my eyes. There will not be an announcement of any case thing today. I'll get to Pennsylvania in a minute. It is Veterans Day. They're not even doing testing today. So COVID's so terrible, but nobody's doing testing because it's Veterans Day, which it is a very valid holiday. But even they're not working today. We're seeing shutdowns, mitigation in place in New Jersey. New Jersey announced, I think it begins tomorrow, 10 p.m. total closure of restaurants. They took away bar seating because Philadelphia or New Jersey allowed bar seating. I guess that doesn't impact us because we don't. Delaware announced that they're looking at further mitigation, and Maryland just reduced their 75% occupancy to 50% occupancy. I'm telling you this because, as I've said before, Pennsylvania never likes to do anything first, but we certainly like to copy and do what other people are doing. There will not be an announcement from Pennsylvania today. Like I said, it is Veterans Day. I don't know. I don't know where we're going to go. I mean, as John said, I mean, it seems like they put us through the ringer. It's clearly showing the data 2-to-1. COVID is spreading in people's homes and private events, not at restaurants, but they can't control personal decisions, but they can try to mitigate against us. So there's chatter. There's nothing confirmed. And that's also why I think this rally next week outside where it's safer is going to be really important, especially because I think we're all kind of feeling this pressure that something could happen. And I just think that we need to be prepared for that. And I hope, obviously, within the governor's office that they recognize that we are not the problem, but they can only control so much. And they certainly seem to like to control us. So, of course, if we hear anything, we will let you know. But our legislative pressure pushing back on this is going to be really key. It's going to be a really bad couple months ahead of us. and we need to get through it. And those federal funds, the Fed's getting some type of package through within the next few weeks could be what saves us. Next slide. Allegheny, I think Allegheny is going to stay aligned with Pennsylvania. So whatever Pennsylvania does, Allegheny is going to follow. I feel comfortable with that. Philadelphia, it's just, I know it's all politics and rhetoric. 2 weeks ago and before, every week, Commissioner Farley in Philadelphia said that restaurants weren't the problem. The increase in cases is not from restaurants. And now he's saying some of it's coming from restaurants. And we are hearing louder rumblings from Philadelphia that there will be some type of shutdown or mitigation in Philadelphia. So I would anticipate Philadelphia is going to do something if the state doesn't. So I'm sorry, no good news in Philadelphia right now. I can tell you, we testified yesterday. I testified, and some of our members testified at a hearing in Philadelphia yesterday. If you are a restaurant in Philadelphia with a commercial lease, we are looking to stop evictions and late fees and penalties in Philadelphia for all of you. So Philadelphia City Council, sometimes they do things that are kind of don't make sense. They do recognize the impact of this on the industry, and we are working with them to try do whatever Philadelphia's version is of assistance to all of you. So we are working very closely with them, and Andrew Zielinski, our lobbyist we use in Philadelphia, has been working harder than he ever has before in terms of lining up those meetings and getting us in front of the right people. So we're pushing back, but in Philadelphia, I think we should be prepared for some type of announcement in Philadelphia. I think yesterday they announced over 800 cases just in one day. So I think we need to be prepared. I'm sorry, I'm not more uplifting, but we're going to rally next week. So there's that. So let's get all of our frustration. And if somebody could create a witty phrase on a sign for me, that would be very much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, I think, for an annual meeting and PRLA board meeting update.
Thank you, Melissa. Nice job. I, like Melissa, have some thoughts about the potential of further mitigation and shutdown. I think that and I'm not going to go into details now. I may do that on the weekly update that I do on Friday, but I think that we've learned that it really didn't help. And particularly, remember, the original shutdown was supposed to be 2 weeks. If we shut down for 2 weeks, everybody would be fine. Obviously, that didn't work either. So I think we're going to be unlikely to do total shutdowns again, but we'll see about that. Melissa, great job. Thank you. Even in light of everything that's going on with COVID, which has certainly monopolized all of our lives this year, some business still goes on. And one of those is that PRLA just completed its annual meeting. And one of the very important aspects of the annual meeting is the election of directors, which is the leadership that actually works with me and my team to ensure that we can deliver the services that we need to deliver to the industry. So I wanted to report on the directors that were elected this year to the PRLA board, which is the statewide board. We had one opening that was created by the retirement of Dee Fagan. Dee's not retiring from her business, but she has served on our board very well for many years. She's a terrific board member, and she was actually term limited out. So she's elected to step off the board, and we can't thank her enough for the great work that she did. And there was one other director seat that was open, which is typically each year, as one of our directors is elected to become an officer of PRLA and ultimately the chairman. So those two openings were filled with Michael Rivkin from the, I should say Michael was elected to be a director. Michael is the owner of the Dolan House Bed and Breakfast in the Northeastern chapter up in the Pocono area. And the other new board member is Susan Dale, the owner of the Spinners Town Hotel in the Bucksmont chapter. So welcome, Michael and Susan. We really appreciate your service to the PRLA board. There was also 4 directors that were re-elected to their positions, existing directors, and those were Lisa Anderson with Outback Steakhouse, Kamara Edwards with Sojourn Philly, Garrett Gallia with Hershey Entertainment and Resorts, and Mary Siegel with Siegel and Associates Restaurant Development. So we, again, thank them and congratulate them on being elected or re-elected to the PRLA board beginning in January 2021. Also very excited to announce that Cynthia Smith, who is the general counsel for Haas's Steak and Sea House, and the Marzoni's Brick Oven and Brewery, and part of the family that owns that organization. Cynthia Smith has been elected to be state treasurer of PRLA, which means that Cynthia will, God willing, ascend to the chairmanship in 2023, going for treasurer next year, vice chairman the following year, and then chairman in 2023. So congratulations to Cynthia Smith. This is a huge commitment on the part of volunteers. Bill Kowaleski, by the way, just this year has attended 59 meetings on behalf of PRLA. Now, I will admit that's a little bit more than usual because of what's going on with COVID, but it was, but it's a tremendous commitment, and we appreciate all of your work on behalf of PRLA. Also, at our board meeting that preceded the annual meeting, we had a lot of things that we covered this year and some really exciting ideas that will be coming forth shortly. But two of the big things that we deal with there are the current financials. And I'm happy to report that because of the terrific work of the PRLA team in taking on, in many cases, double and triple duty, as we were forced to reduce our headcount and expenses earlier this year, we're actually ahead of plan on financially for the PRLA this year. That would be on, not surprisingly, on net revenue, not on total revenue, but at least on the bottom line, the team has done a great job in controlling expenses, because we need to be here for the long term for all of you, and we intend to do so by carefully managing our expenses. But every member of the PRLA team has stepped up and done things they never expected they would have to do this year in order to ensure the stability of the organization. So I thank them for that. We also presented a budget for 2021 and received unanimous approval from the board of directors for our 2021 budget. 2021 will likely be even more challenging for PRLA as 2020, just like your businesses, unfortunately, will probably be even more challenging next year than they were this year, because of the fact that it's going to take a long time for our industry to come back. And regrettably, there's going to be a lot of our restaurants that aren't going to be there next year, and some of our hotels that aren't going to be there either. So we have a realistic budget. We're not increasing any expenses. In fact, we've reduced some additional expenses for next year. And we're also anticipating a relatively significant decline in membership dues because of the fact that people that are struggling with their businesses can't always pay dues. And as you may know, we reduced the price of membership significantly in the height of this, which we intend to maintain that in the future, so that now restaurants join at $365 a year, and if they pay for the full year, it's $335. They get a month free. And additional restaurants in a chain are coming at only $100. So we've made it very affordable, but it's going to put the pressure on our team to continue to maintain expenses along the way. A lot of our revenue, certainly not all of it, we have a balanced revenue stream, but a lot of it comes from membership. So as you're looking at your financials, we've opened this association up to all, regardless of their ability to join or pay. We intend to keep it that way as long as we possibly can. But your consideration in coming on board as a member is going to really help us to achieve that budget next year. And I will say that 200 new members have come on since the onset of COVID-19. And these are folks that were never actually engaged with PRLA before. And I cannot thank them enough for saying, even at a time when I'm struggling to pay my bills, PRLA is that important that I'm going to invest in the work that PRLA is doing. So I think we have a budget that's realistic, and yet is going to be challenging. And we also have revitalized and reworked our membership committee under the leadership of Jeff Cohen and Keith Coleman to help us more with member-to-member enrollment, which we've really gotten away from in, if you will, in modern times, largely because volunteers have been so busy, and because had created a professional sales force. Unfortunately, in light of COVID, we had to eliminate the professional membership sales force. So we're going to be back to a member-to-member enrollment, as well as online marketing, and the simplification of our due structure and the reduction of our due structure make it a lot easier to become engaged with us. So all in all, it was an extremely productive meeting. The directors spent about 3 hours in meeting to help us with our direction for 2021 in many, many different areas. And then in the afternoon, after the annual meeting, we were very, very fortunate to have both Chip Rogers, the CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association, and Tom Benet, the CEO of the National Restaurant Association, address our membership and non-members about PRLA, or about what they're doing and their relationship with PRLA. That's available. It's archived and available to watch for all on our website. And I suggest that you do it. Chip and Tom each took a half an hour to give an update on the industry. There's very little overlap in the way that they viewed it. Then following that, we had a superb panel of industry experts representing hotels, restaurants, and travel and tourism to talk about what they see ahead for the industry. That's also available in archive as well. We had C.A. Clark from Miles Partnership, Victor Fernandez from Black Box Intelligence, the foremost authorities on restaurant data and forecasting, and Mark Woodworth, one of the world's foremost authorities on the hotel industry, were on that panel. So you can see that as well. All of this was available, complimentary, free, no charge to anyone who wanted to get involved, because we felt it was that important. I might make one last comment about our board meeting. Our board meetings, as all of the PRLA meetings, are open to all. And many of you on this call, and I think there was about 30 people who are not on the board who sat through the board meeting because they wanted to learn more about the way PRLA works and how it is governed. And I really appreciate the commitment that you made to attend the board meeting, even though you're not on the board itself. So all in all, it was the meetings on Monday were very well attended by leadership, volunteer leadership, the PRLA team, including Steph Otterson, Eric Adams, Hope Sterner, and all of the rest of the team did a phenomenal job in making sure, and Heidi Howard, in making sure that the meetings came off without a hitch. So my thanks to all of them. And again, thanks to you who attended on Monday just to learn more about PRLA, and those of you who attended one of the afternoon meetings. And again, if you didn't attend the afternoon meeting, I suggest you take a look at it. It's a 2-hour commitment on your part to hear from 5 of the industry experts. I think you'll find it very enlightening. With that, Melissa, I'll turn it back to you.
I think we're going to turn it over to Hope to go over the upcoming webinars. Hope, take it away.
Well, I'll go through this quickly, but we do have some webinars that are coming up that we think could be important for you to check out. RSI will be doing a breaking down your P&L webinar. They're only about a half an hour, and they do a great job with talking about what it is, best practices, and how to engage your management staff on your P&Ls. Melissa will be back next week, and we also will be having Focus HRO, which is a new partner we're working with, to talk about employee handbooks, why it's important to have these, what's important to have in there to help avoid lawsuits and claims. So I think it's a good time well spent next week to join that webinar. Ecolab is going to be doing a webinar tomorrow talking about preparing for the flu season. So they will have a infectious prevention public health official talking about the differences between the common cold, flu, and COVID, and ways to protect yourself and your business. So please take the time to check that out. If not, they will have a recording available for you. To the next slide, Eric. And as always, we're promoting our training. We do have training available. COVID training and ServSafe classes are being held. And it is important for you to keep up to date with your certifications at this time. And please check out our the dining commitment and the PA promise on our website. They are still uploading all that information onto their national website for consumers to check out who is participating in these commitments. So we think it's a great way for promoting your business for future consumers coming in. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Melissa. I think that the questions are up there, but not too many today.
Not too many. I do have, before I get into questions, I do want to clarify because I've gotten 4 emails today on this. So for point of clarification for indoor events, you are at 20% capacity if you are not in the city of Philadelphia. So if you are having a Christmas get together or a private event of a private group of people, 20% is your capacity. If you are one of those lucky ducks to be in the city of Philadelphia, 10% is your indoor capacity. So while as of today at 11:40 on 11/11, you are at 50% capacity indoor if you're serving the public. If it's a private event, you are at 20% in 66 counties and 10% if you are in Philadelphia. I've gotten an odd number of questions about that just today, so I wanted to reiterate that. And also, I do also want to thank all of our veterans as well. 11 a.m. on 11/11. I don't know, Allison, maybe it's a lucky day, but if you saw, I was on a call with city council earlier and my dog was just being ridiculous. So I don't know if that started out my day so lucky, but we'll take it. And if I'm talking a little loudly, because if I don't, you'll hear the dog snoring behind me. So clearly she's not entertained by me today. Michael, thank you for the thank you, as you always do. Steph did link to the daily update because I am good, but I didn't want to go through all of the leadership elections off the top of my head. But generally, those leadership elections in Harrisburg and the House were good. I already announced phrases. I have no, and Ben does have rally signs. Is there anything we can do to ensure the sanctity of the popular vote and electoral college votes from Pennsylvania? Yes, I mean, that's what's going on right now. I mean, there's court cases. I think we're still going to have election reforms that are going to go through the legislature. There were supposed to be more that were supposed to be done within the last month. So I think we need to work through all of that. I think what happened was we had a lot of changes, whether through the legislature or from leadership within our government, that caused a lot of confusion, and our hope and anticipation is that that will work out. I mean, the sanctity of the election is key in all of this. And to that end, I did just get an update. Frank Dermody did lose his election, so the State House is going to be 113 to 90, which is going to make Democratic House leadership elections pretty exciting for those that are political nerds, which might just be me. There's a question about the NRA study that you helped correct. It wasn't an NRA study. Steph did post it. It's from Stanford and Northwest. And like I said, the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, is working through that study. We saw this before with the CDC numbers, is that something goes out, the media picks it up, and then we look at it and there's just lots of inconsistencies. And like I said, it already looks like, in terms of that study, if it truly did just look at March to May, isn't really applicable to our restaurants since all of you were closed in that time period. But please stay tuned for that. We will get you that information. We will have an official statement if you hear anything on that front. Alcohol kills the virus, drink up. Other word. That's why I haven't gotten COVID yet, knock on wood. I have a glass of wine at least every night. So there's that. There's a shout out to Ben and all the speakers at yesterday's Chester Courthouse rally. Their speeches were perfect, on point, powerful, and passionate. Oh, I didn't know that they were silenced by authority. Someone's going to have to fill me in on that one. I hope those words are amplified by every means possible. Really great job. And thanks for making signs and all who came out to support. Well, Sean, that's great. So now everybody can come to Harrisburg and duplicate it. So let's recreate all of that energy in Harrisburg, especially because I will be inviting the entire legislature to attend and show their support. And Susan Dale said, thank you, John. Susan, we are thrilled. Poor Susan, like I said, right before COVID happened, she was in DC with me, and that was the last time any of us traveled anywhere. So Susan, I think, was the last PRLA member I saw before COVID happened. Just as a refresher, I believe the answer is no. Are we allowed to do a cocktail appetizer private party with people mingling and not being seated? No. They cannot stand and consume their beverages. So if they're drinking or eating, they have to be seated. Now they can go up to a bar and get their drink, indoor or outdoor. They can go get a drink, but they have to take their drink and then go sit down in their seat to consume it. So the only change is that now you can go up to the bar to get it, but the seated rule still is applicable, at least in written form, from the governor's office and the Secretary of Health and the LCB and every other entity that has developed guidance on that front. And yes, I know that makes no sense, especially when you're trying to hold holiday parties, but that's where we are. Also, if they're getting up and getting a drink, they have to wear a mask. So I'm not quite sure how they would drink their drink with a mask on. It really is impossible. Unless there's a straw. I don't know. We can look into that. Oh, great offer. If any members of PRLA are coming to the rally in Harrisburg and need accommodations, email Hilton Garden Inn's Director of Sales that his information, Troy, is on there. If for no, I mean, obviously you should come to Harrisburg to like rally, but also you're going to meet all the PRLA staff because I'm making all of them come help. So come hang out with me and everybody else. And I'm sorry I didn't get to make it out to Pittsburgh, but I hope many of you can come to Harrisburg as well. And the panel presentation was very good yesterday or Monday. It's Wednesday, isn't it? On Monday. Thank you, Sue, for the thank you. Okay, let's see. I knew someone was going to have a question. Clarify, please. An R license can have multiple events in separate rooms as long as groups don't mingle. Does that mean the group should use separate restrooms? Should they have separate entrances or entrance exit times required or encouraged? So yes, you can have multiple events as long as they're in separate rooms. For private events, you are at your 20% capacity. You do not need to have them use separate bathrooms. It's encouraged that you keep people segregated so that if you have 5 rooms that have 100 people in, that you don't have 500 people funneling to the same bathrooms. But you can have them share bathrooms, but you just need to make sure that they're not congregating, they're wearing their masks. There is no delineation that every room has to have its own separate bathroom, but you do need to encourage separation. Also, it's not a requirement to have separate entrances and exits. But if you're going to have a lot of people moving in and out, that makes sense. So really, you just want to be focusing on how can you ensure that those groups aren't mingling outside of more than they have to. All of this, of course, everything's clear as mud and everything's gray. So there's no specific, yes, you have to have separate entrances and exits. They do say that if you have a lot of people, let's say moving from an outdoor wedding to an indoor reception, to maybe try and space that out so you don't have everybody flocking in the same door at the same time. The PSU study shows that Listerine inactivates 99.9% of the virus. Okay. And it looks like they're from the southeast. There is a bus that's being put together for the Harrisburg rally. I've heard that there's a bus coming out of State College as well for the rally, and I believe that there's organizing out west in Pittsburgh to try and get a bus together. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch with Heidi Howard in our office. How long do you anticipate the rally to be? I have my list of ideal it's going to be less than an hour. It's going to be like 45 minutes. But obviously, there will be media there as well. We'll be hanging out a little bit afterwards. So we do expect it to be 45 minutes to an hour. But also, if you're coming into town and your legislator is going to be here, it's a good opportunity to also catch up with them as well. So maybe plan a little bit more time for it if you want to interact with legislators or just hang out a bit in Harrisburg. If you haven't been in the Capitol, it's beautiful. I'm jaded because I've been working there for now 13 years, but it is one of the most beautiful buildings, state capitals in the entire country. So I encourage you to hang out a little bit if you are able to come to town. I think that's the end of the questions.
Looks like it.
Like people trying to call me now. Okay.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We are recording this and we'll send it out and put it onto our website. If you have any questions about the rally, please reach out to us at the office or to Heidi Howard. We could help you out with that for next week. And with that, I think we're done.
See you next week at the rally and for the webinar.
Everybody have a great rest of your afternoon.